She did not mean to touch him. One moment she was turning. Easy, unhurried. The practiced movement of a woman who had spent 3 seasons learning how to exit a conversation without anyone noticing she had left. The next moment her gloved hand was flat against a chest that was not Felix Dunor's. The ballroom noise dropped away. The chandeliers blurred. The laughter of 100 guests faded into nothing because the man standing in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath against her cheek, was not the man she had been carefully, deliberately, expertly pursuing all evening. It was his brother, the Duke of Ravenmore. His jaw was sharp. His eyes were darker than coal and completely unreadable. He did not step back. He did not apologize. He simply looked down at her with that quiet, terrifying calm that powerful men wear like armor, and said, low enough that only she could hear it, "Wrong, brother, my lady." Her heart did not just skip. It stopped because the way he said it did not sound like a correction. It sounded like a warning or a confession. She could not tell which. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Lady Nora Winslet had not arrived at the Dunbar Ball by accident. She had arrived with a plan. A careful, considered, entirely sensible plan that she had constructed over several weeks with the quiet precision of a woman who understood exactly what was at stake and had decided not to pretend otherwise. The plan was Felix Dunbar. Lord Felix, the younger brother, the warm one, the one who laughed easily and moved through rooms like a man who had never once doubted his welcome in them. He was kind, he was solvent, he was available, and Nora had decided, honestly, without romance clouding the calculation, that affection could grow from a foundation of genuine liking and mutual respect. It had happened for women in far worse situations with far less promising material. Her mother was at home with a creditor's letter on the mantelpiece. Her sister Clara was 17 and deserved at least one more season before she had to understand what real financial pressure felt like. Nora had made a decision. She was carrying it through with everything she had. She had arrived in an ivory gown with gold threading at the hem. Her dark hair was dressed simply. Her posture suggested confidence without arrogance. She was not the most titled woman in the room. She was not the wealthiest. But she had something harder to name and considerably more powerful than either. The ability to make whoever she was speaking feel like the only person in the world worth speaking to. She had turned that quality on Felix Dunbar with full and deliberate force. And it was working. What she did not know, what no one had warned her about, what she could not have seen from where she stood, was that from the upper landing along the east wall of the Dunbar Ballroom, the Duke of Ravenmore had been watching her do it. From the moment she walked through the door, through every smile she had given Felix, through every carefully placed laugh, through every gloved hand that had brushed the sleeve just one breath longer than necessary, he had been watching all of it, and he had not looked away once. Callum Dunbar was 31 years old, the 5th Duke of Ravenmore, and a man who had trained himself over many years to observe without reacting. It was a useful skill in Parliament. It was a useful skill in business. It had served him in every area of his life with such consistency that he had stopped thinking of it as discipline and simply accepted it as his nature. He was not certain it was his nature tonight. He stood on the upper landing with a glass of whiskey he had barely touched and watched his brother laugh at something Nora said. Watched her lean in slightly when Felix spoke. Watched Felix's expression do the thing it always did when a woman captured his attention fully. That open, lit-up quality that had always come so easily to him, that Callum had never once been able to replicate and had long since stopped trying. His jaw tightened by a fraction. He had noticed Lady Nora Winslet the moment she entered the ballroom. He could not have explained precisely why. There were prettier women in the room. There were better titled ones. But something about the way she moved had snagged his attention before she had spoken to a single person. A kind of purposeful calm that was different from the performance of calm he was used to seeing in ballrooms. She was not pretending to be at ease. She simply was. Or she was very close to it, which, from a distance, amounted to the same thing. He watched her cross the room and choose Felix. And something in him went very still. It was not jealousy. He told himself that clearly and firmly. He did not know this woman. He had no claim on any reaction to her whatsoever. What he felt was something closer to nameless, a specific, uncomfortable awareness that had settled in his chest and refused to be categorized neatly. He finished his whiskey. Beside him, his cousin Lord Harwick appeared from nowhere with the casual inevitability of a man constitutionally incapable of leaving silences unfilled. He followed Callum's gaze down to the ballroom floor and said, in the tone of a man consulting an internal ledger, "Winslet girl, father died 4 years ago. Mother quietly managing something difficult. 2 seasons without a match, which is surprising given the face and the wit." He paused. Felix seems to be enjoying himself. Felix enjoys himself consistently, Callum said. True. Harwick tilted his glass toward the floor below, though that one might actually hold his attention. She is making him feel funny. Men will follow women who make them feel funny to the ends of the earth. Callum said nothing. While you are staring, Harwick observed pleasantly, I am watching the room. It is my family's ball. You are watching one specific corner of the room with an intensity that suggests the rest of it does not exist. Harwick smiled into his drink, which is entirely your business. I am simply noting it. Callum set his empty glass on the tray of a passing footman, straightened his coat. I am going downstairs. Harwick's smile widened. Of course you are. On the floor below, Nora was not aware of any of this. She was aware of Felix, of the conversation moving between them like a warm current, of the evening going better than she had planned. She was aware at the edges of her attention of Lady Priscilla Hartwell moving through the room in deep rose silk, newly widowed, beautiful, carrying herself with the easy confidence of a woman who had been admired long enough to be entirely comfortable with it. She was aware of Harwick descending the stairs from the upper landing and disappearing into the crowd near the card room. She was aware, a moment later, that someone new had entered the gravitational field of the conversation, not joining it, not approaching, simply present. In the way that large, quiet things are present, taking up space without demanding attention, and somehow getting it anyway. She turned, mostly out of instinct. Felix had turned too, but he was looking toward Lady Priscilla, who had appeared at his other elbow with perfect timing and a warm, bright greeting that Felix returned with immediate and entirely genuine delight. Nora watched Felix's face for one honest second. What she saw there, when he looked at Lady Priscilla, was not what she had been carefully building in him all evening. It was something older, something already formed, something that did not need any of the careful architecture she had been constructing, because it was simply already there. Her chest did something quiet and final. She stepped back one step, just enough to remove herself from the triangle of the conversation, without making it obvious. She kept her expression pleasant. She turned with a small, easy movement, as though she had simply decided to refresh her lemonade. She turned directly into the Duke of Ravenmore. Her gloved hand struck his chest. The impact was not hard, but it was solid, and she stumbled half a step and grabbed the lapel of his evening coat before she could stop herself. The lemonade glass tilted dangerously. He caught her wrist, steadying both her and the glass in one swift, certain movement. She looked up. He looked down. The ballroom noise continued around them. The music continued. Somewhere behind her, Felix was laughing at something Lady Priscilla had said. None of it penetrated the specific, airless bubble that had formed in the 12 inches of space between her face and the Duke's. He was not Felix. He was nothing like Felix. His eyes were darker, his jaw harder, his expression stripped of every comfortable, welcoming quality his brother carried so effortlessly. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he's been trying not to think about and has just walked directly into without meaning to. He released her wrist, slowly. Wrong, brother, my lady. 4 words. Quiet, precise. But underneath them, something she could not name and was not entirely sure she was meant to. The heat in her cheeks had nothing to do with embarrassment, and that frightened her considerably more than the collision had. She lifted her chin. I was not looking for anyone. Your Grace. No, he said. His eyes moved briefly to the space behind her, where Felix and Lady Priscilla were still talking, then back to her face. It was not agreement. It was something more careful than agreement. something that held a distinction she did not have time to pull apart. While standing in the middle of the ballroom with her hand still warm from where he had held her wrist, she curtsied. She walked away. She kept her spine perfectly straight and her pace perfectly even, and she did not look back at him once. She would not know until much later that he had not moved from that spot for a full 3 minutes after she left. That Harwick had found him there and said nothing. For once in his life, nothing at all. That the Duke of Ravenmore had stood very still in the middle of his own family's ballroom and looked at the space where she had been standing with an expression that Harwick would later describe privately, and only to himself, as a man recognizing something he had been waiting for without knowing he was waiting. The morning came in gray and indifferent, the way London mornings often did, when one needed them to be bracing and clarifying, and they simply were not. Nora sat at her writing desk with cold tea and a letter she could not finish. Across the hall, her mother was receiving the housekeeper, and the murmur of their conversation moved under the door in that careful, lowered register that meant the subject was money, and the conclusions were not cheerful. She had been thinking about 4 words since she left the ballroom. Not Felix, not the plan, not the creditor's letter on the mantelpiece or the season ahead, or any of the practical, sensible things she was supposed to be thinking about. 4 words, spoken quietly in a crowded room by a man she had never properly met, delivered in a voice that had no business, sounding like that, meaning something she had no business wanting to understand. She pressed her fingers to her temple and told herself firmly to stop. She picked up her pen. Margaret arrived before noon, still in her outdoor coat, dark curls escaping their pins, which only happened when she had been walking quickly or when she had news she was physically unable to contain. It turned out to be both. She sat down, waved away the tea Nora offered, which was alarming in itself, and said it without preamble, without softening, without any of the cushioning she sometimes deployed when information required careful handling. The Duke of Ravenmore made inquiries this morning. The room went very still. About what? Nora said. About you. Nora set down her pen very carefully. He does not know me. He met you last night, for 30 seconds. I collided with him. I said 4 words and walked away. Apparently, Margaret said those were sufficient. Nora stood and moved to the window, which she always did when she needed to think, without anyone reading her face. The street outside was ordinary and unhelpful. A cart, 2 women with parcels, a boy and a dog. Everything continuing as though nothing had shifted at all. He could be inquiring for any number of reasons, she said. Business reasons. Property adjacent to ours. A connection to my father he wants to verify. He could be, Margaret agreed, in the tone of someone who did not believe a word of it. The Duke of Ravenmore does not involve himself with women like me. He has refused 3 title matches in 4 years. The gossip sheets have run out of ways to speculate about it. That is true, so this is something else. Something entirely unrelated to what you are implying. Margaret's voice was gentle and firm in equal measure. I have known you since we were girls. I know what your face does when you are frightened of something you also want. You are doing it right now. Nora turned from the window. I am doing nothing of the sort. You are standing at a window having an argument with me that is actually an argument with yourself, which you always do when something has unsettled you more than you are prepared to admit. Margaret folded her hands in her lap. What happened last night? The actual version, not the one you would tell your mother. Silence settled in the room. Then Nora said, quietly, carefully, as though the words caused something, "He looked at me. Men look at you regularly. Not like this." She stopped, pressed her lips together, tried again. "He looked at me the way you look at something you have been trying to solve and have just understood. And I did not know what to do with that. So I walked away, and I have been thinking about it ever since." She crossed her arms, which is absurd, because he is the Duke of Ravenmore, and I am a woman with a creditor's letter on her mantelpiece who spent last night flirting with his brother. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and produced a card, holding it out with the steady calm of someone presenting evidence in a court of law. His solicitor also left a message. Nora stared at it. What kind of message? The Duke of Ravenmore requests the pleasure of Lady Winslet's company at a small gathering at Ravenmore House this Thursday. An intimate dinner. 12 guests. Margaret paused. You are specifically named on the invitation. Not your mother. Not your family. You. Nora took the card. She read it twice. The handwriting was not a solicitor's. It was angular and precise and entirely individual. The handwriting of a man who had written it himself and chosen every word deliberately. At the bottom, below the formal invitation, and above the Duke's seal, there were 4 additional words written smaller, almost as though they had been added last, after everything else was already decided. She read them once and could not look away. I hope you will come. Not a command, not an assumption. A hope from a man whose entire reputation rested on the appearance of wanting nothing he did not already have. Outside, London went about its gray morning business. Clara's voice floated in from the hallway. Her mother's murmur continued behind the study door. Everything ordinary, everything unchanged. And yet Nora held the card in both hands and felt the ground shift very slightly beneath her, the way it does when something is ending in something else. Something unnamed and not yet understood is quietly and irrevocably beginning. The invitation sat on Nora's dressing table for 2 full days. She did not respond immediately, which was itself a kind of response, and she knew it. A woman who felt nothing about a dinner invitation from the Duke of Ravenmore would have written her acceptance or her polite decline within the hour and moved on with her week. The fact that she kept finding reasons to walk past the dressing table and glance at the card, the fact that she had memorized the 4 words at the bottom without meaning to, told her something she was not entirely ready to hear. She went to the dinner. She wore deep green because she had thought carefully about what to wear and decided on the color that made her feel most like herself, rather than most like an impression of what she imagined he wanted to see. Ravenmore House glowed against the dark Mayfair street like something from a painting. 12 guests, as promised, and the Duke, at the far end of the drawing room when she arrived, speaking with Sir Randolph Price, turned the moment she entered, not immediately, within moments, as though he had been aware of her arrival. Before he looked up, he crossed the room, deliberately, like a man who had decided to do something, and was doing it. Lady Nora, your grace. She held his gaze, because she had decided in the carriage that she would not look away first. Not tonight. Not in his house, where everything was already on his terms. Something moved in his expression, not quite approval. Something more complex than approval. I am glad you came, he said, for words again. She was beginning to think he did things in 4s on purpose. She almost said so and then did not, because she was not ready for him to know she had been counting. Dinner was not like any dinner she had attended before. He did not hold court. He did not dominate. He listened more than he spoke, which she had not expected, and when he did speak, it was with directness that cut cleanly through the usual layers of implication and suggestion that ballrooms ran on, and arrived simply at the actual thing. He spoke to her directly 3 times. The first time was about her father, not with pity, not with the careful sympathy people wrap those conversations in, but as a fact, a bill her father had supported in the Lords 7 years ago. Well-reasoned, he said, ahead of its time. The outcome had proven him right. He said it and moved on without waiting for her to be grateful. She was grateful anyway. The second time was about a book, a history of the Byzantine court she had mentioned in passing. He had not only read it, he had disagreed with the author's central argument and said so concisely, and gave her a reason interesting enough that she disagreed back without thinking about whether she should. They went 3 full exchanges before Lady Fenwick broke the thread with a comment that made the whole table laugh. The third time was after dinner. Drawing room. Smaller conversations. He appeared at her side without announcement and handed her a cup of tea she had not asked for but had wanted. You argued well about Theodora, he said. I was right about Theodora, she said. You were, he said, clean, uncomplicated. No hedge. No qualifier, no softening pivot to a related point. Just, you were. And then he looked at her steadily and waited to see what she would do next. Later, when the evening had narrowed into smaller groups and the fire had settled low and Mrs. Letitia Kane had inserted herself into their conversation with the smooth precision of a woman who collected information the way other women collected porcelain, and then departed with a satisfied air of someone who had confirmed exactly what she came to confirm. Callum looked at Nora and said, quietly, without performance, "She will talk." "Yes," Nora said. "She will say that I invited you specifically, sat near you twice, brought you tea, spoke with you privately for longer than I spoke with anyone else." He held her gaze, all of which is true. The fire crackled. Somewhere across the room, Harwick was telling a story that required physical demonstration. The evening continued around them, warm and ordinary, and entirely unaware of what was happening inside the 12 inches of space between them. Nora held his gaze and understood with sudden and complete clarity that she was standing at the edge of something, that the ground behind her was a familiar, manageable territory of plans and practicalities, and knowing what everything meant, and that the ground in front of her was the Duke of Ravenmore, who was looking at her like she was worth looking at, who had told her she argued well and meant it, who had written 4 extra words at the bottom of an invitation, because apparently he had wanted to, and had decided not to pretend otherwise. "Your Grace," she said. "Callum," he said, quietly, only for her. She felt it land in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. Concentric rings spreading outward from a single point, reaching every edge. "That is very forward," she said. "I know," he said, and did not take it back. The morning after Thursday's dinner, London decided to gossip. Nora knew it before she had finished breakfast, because Margaret arrived at 8 without sending word ahead, which only happened when information was already moving faster than a messenger could carry it. She came to the front door with her coat still buttoned and her expression wearing that particular combination of excitement and warning that meant the news was both good and dangerous simultaneously. Mrs. Letitia Kane had been busy, the story she constructed and was now distributing, drawing room to drawing room, tea table to tea table, in the carefully lowered voice of a woman who prefaced everything with, "I am only saying what I heard, and I do not believe it myself, but others are talking," was this: that Lady Nora Winslet had spent 2 seasons pursuing Lord Felix, done or with mercenary intent, that when Lady Priscilla appeared and that avenue closed, she had pivoted with suspicious speed toward the more powerful and more wealthy brother, that the whole sequence of events, the flirting, the collision, the dinner invitation, had been engineered by a woman of limited means and considerable calculation, that the Duke, brilliant in all other respects, was being managed by a pretty face and a sharp tongue, and would see it eventually. Nora sat with it for 20 minutes. Then she stood up and asked for a coat. She went to Ravenmore House. This was not done. An unmarried woman arriving unannounced at a bachelor duke's residence was exactly the kind of thing that confirmed every word Mrs. Kane was saying. Nora knew this. She went anyway, because the alternative was sitting in her house waiting for Callum to hear it from someone else. And she had promised herself in the beginning that she would not manage what she gave him. She was shown into the library. It was the most entirely his room she had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling books, 2 large desks, a fire, maps on the walls, the quality of organized density that suggested a mind that needed space to spread itself out fully and had arranged its surroundings accordingly. He stood when she came in. His expression moved through surprise and then something sharper, a reading of her face that took approximately 3 seconds and landed with complete accuracy. "Sit down," he said. "Tell me." She sat. She told him all of it, exactly as Margaret had delivered it, without editorializing, without softening, without managing the edges of it into something easier to receive. She told him about Mrs. Kane's campaign, about the story being constructed, about the mercenary calculation accusation, about what people were saying and what the saying of it was designed to do. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, "You came here to tell me yourself. I will not have you learn things about me from other people when I can tell you directly." He looked at her for a long moment. "Do you know what the story gets wrong?" "Several things," she said. "It gets you wrong," he said. "It builds a version of you that is entirely strategic and not at all real. Because a woman who is entirely strategic does not walk into a duke's house unannounced to tell him an uncomfortable truth, she could have managed around. He stood and moved the window. It also assumes I am not capable of seeing you clearly, which is the part one find most objectionable. People will believe it regardless. She said, quietly, some will. He turned. I am not some people. She held his gaze. What do you want to do? He crossed the room and crouched down in front of her chair so that his eyes were level with hers. This close she could see every particular of his face. The steadiness in it, the certainty, the thing underneath that she now knew was not coldness but its precise opposite. A man who felt things with precision and a depth that most people never reached, and had been careful with it for a very long time, because he had not yet found somewhere safe to put it. I want to make it relevant, he said. I want to give them something true to talk about that is larger than the fiction they are currently constructing. He held her gaze. Nora, I had intended to do this with considerably more ceremony, a better setting. I have been planning it for 2 weeks, and I had a whole specific version of how it would go. She could not breathe. But you are here now, he said, which is better than any setting I had planned, because you came here on your own and told me the truth. And that is exactly the kind of woman I want to spend my life with. He took her hands in both of his. Steady, certain, will you marry me? Not a performance, not a speech. 5 words and a question, direct as everything else he had ever said to her. She looked at his face, at the man underneath the Duke, the one who rose before dawn and wrote careful notes and laughed briefly and genuinely when something surprised him, who had looked at her across a crowded ballroom and felt something he had not planned for and had not tried to dismiss. And she said the only word that had ever been sufficient between them. Yes,